The chase was on. Ben 10, no longer a brash teenager but a seasoned hero in his prime, streaked through the chaotic, non-linear space of a dimensional storm. He was in his Jetray form, his neuroshock blasts harmlessly peppering the hull of the fleeing ship ahead. Inside that ship was Vilgax, more machine than flesh, his squid-like face a mask of fury. He was desperate. His latest gambit, a new, unstable reality drive, had backfired, tearing a hole in the fabric of their universe and dragging them into this swirling, energetic tempest. "You cannot escape me, Vilgax." Ben's voice, a high-pitched electric trill, echoed over the comms. "It's over. It is over for you, Tennyson," Vilgax roared back, slamming his fist onto a glowing alien console. "If I cannot rule our reality, I will rule another." He channeled the storm's energy into his drive. The engine screamed, and reality tore open. A vortex of impossible. Sickly colors purple, green, and a deep, visceral crimson opened before him. Vilgax's ship plunged through. Ben didn't hesitate. He folded his wings and dove in right after his nemesis. The transition was agonizing. It wasn't the clean jump of a hyperspace lane or the smooth slide between dimensions he was used to. This felt wrong. It felt sick. It was a dimension of pure, screaming, malevolent emotion. He felt waves of hatred, despair, and a terrible, exultant rage wash over his mind. He burst out of the vortex into real space, the transition so violent it almost tore his wings from his body. He found himself in orbit of a planet that looked like a diseased marble, swathed in continents of gray-brown smog and pockmarked by the lights of continent-spanning cities. His sensors flared. He saw Vilgax's ship, trailing fire, its systems failing, as it plummeted into the atmosphere. Ben angled his body and followed him down. He descended into a world that was, in a word, hell. The sky was a churning vortex of purple and red. The air was thick with the stench of chemicals, ozone, and mountains of burning dead. As he got closer, he saw the source of the chaos. A war. A war on a scale he had never witnessed. He saw impossible, Gothic spires, the size of mountains, blazing with fire. He saw armies, millions strong, locked in brutal, medieval combat. Their crude, laser-spewing rifles a bizarre contradiction to their bayonet charges. He saw winged, red-skinned things with swords, soaring through the air, being met by crude, propeller-driven aircraft. He saw Vilgax's ship crash-land directly in the no-man's land between two clashing armies, and he saw one of those armies. They were giants, 8 feet tall, clad in heavy, ornate black armor, wielding strange, roaring swords that had teeth. They were slaughtering everything in their path. Ben landed, reverting to his human form in a flash of green light, the master control of the Omnitrix glowing on his chest. He stood in the mud and blood of a shattered plaza, the air screaming with artillery. "Okay," Ben Tennyson said, his voice grim. "This is new." Vilgax really picked a winner this time. Ben stood in the ruins of a massive cathedral, the air thick with the smell of promethium and blood. He watched from the shadows as the two sides fought. On one side, a tide of shrieking, red-skinned creatures with brass swords, led by hulking horned beasts. He'd fought their kind before, nasty, straightforward evil, demons. On the other side were the black-armored giants, Space Marines, of the Black Templars chapter. They fought with a disciplined, cold fury, their roaring chainswords carving through the demons, their heavy bolter guns firing miniature rockets that blew the creatures apart. Okay, so, demons versus really angry knights, Ben reasoned. Seems like a simple lesser of two evils choice. Then, he saw it. A group of humans, clad in tattered, bloody robes, their faces painted with strange, 8-pointed stars, were trying to flee the battle. They were trapped against a wall, clearly civilians caught in the crossfire. A squad of the Black Templars broke off from the main fight, not to engage the demons, but to march directly towards the terrified humans. "Thank God," Ben muttered, relaxing. "They're saving them." The lead Templar, a sergeant with a skull-faced helmet, raised his bolter. The humans fell to their knees, their hands raised, pleading for mercy. "For the Emperor," the Marine roared. "Suffer not the heretic to live." He opened fire. The bolter rounds were devastating, turning the unarmed, pleading humans into a red spray. Ben froze. The world went silent in his ears. He wasn't just shocked, he was furious. He had seen evil. He had seen Vilgax. He had seen Diagon. He had seen the Hybrid. But this was different. This was the cold, righteous, fanatical slaughter of the defenseless. The Templars, their purge complete, turned to rejoin the battle. They found their path blocked by a new figure. It was tall, crystalline, its body forged from a vibrant green-blue gemstone. Ben, now in his diamond head form, stood before them, his arms crossed, his crystalline face a mask of cold, unreadable anger. The Black Templar sergeant stopped, his bolter held at the ready. His autosenses tried to classify the new entity. "Xenos," he growled, the word a curse. "An alien of unknown origin. Look at its form. It mocks the sacred structure of man." "You killed them," Ben's voice, a hard, resonant, crystalline sound echoed in the plaza. "They were unarmed. They were begging for their lives." "They were heretics," the Marine replied, as if this were the simplest, most obvious truth in the universe. Their lives were forfeit. "Now, Xenos, you will stand aside, or you will be purged. Your existence is an affront to the Emperor." The sergeant aimed his bolter at Ben's head. "This is your only warning." Ben didn't move a muscle. "That's what you think." The Templar fired. The bolter round, a weapon that could shatter ferrocrete, screamed across the space and struck Diamond Head squarely in the chest. It didn't explode. It didn't penetrate. It simply ricocheted, sparking harmlessly off the super-dense tatanite skin and embedding itself in the wall of a building 100 meters away. A profound, stunned silence fell over the entire squad of Space Marines. They stared, their minds unable to process what they had just seen. Their holy, Emperor-blessed weapons had failed. "My turn," Diamond Head said, his arms morphing into long, sharp, crystalline blades. The confrontation in the shattered plaza was a clash of two irreconcilable realities. The Black Templars, paragons of a universe where faith and firepower were the answer to every question, had just met a question they couldn't answer. "It is a Xenos of unnatural resilience," the sergeant roared, his shock turning to righteous fury. "Focus fire. By the Emperor's will, shatter it." The entire squad of 10 Space Marines opened fire at once. A storm of explosive bolter rounds washed over Diamond Head's form. The sound was a deafening, continuous roar, the impacts of flashing, sparking inferno on his crystalline body. He stood unmoving, an island of green in a sea of fire, the bolts exploding, cracking, and ricocheting, but failing to do any significant damage. "It is not working, Brother Sergeant," one of the Marines yelled, his faith wavering in the face of such impossible defense. "Blasphemy," the sergeant roared. He signaled to the rear. "Brother Varus, bring the Melta. We will burn this creature from existence." A heavy weapons specialist, carrying a Melta gun, pushed to the front. The weapon, designed to vaporize battle tank armor, whined as it charged, its nozzle glowing with a terrifying, white-hot energy. He fired. A beam of pure, thermal fusion energy lanced out. Ben smirked. "Wrong alien, pal." In a flash of green light, the crystalline form of Diamond Head was gone, replaced by a tall, purple, semi-crystalline being with a single, massive, green eye. Chromastone. Chromastone simply raised his hand. The Melta beam struck his palm. It did not burn him. It did not harm him. It simply stopped. The weapon's entire, devastating payload was absorbed into his body, which began to glow with a brilliant purple light. The Melta gun sputtered and died, its energy cells instantly drained. The heavy weapons Marine stared at his useless weapon in pure, dumbfounded horror. "Thanks for the top-off," Chromastone's voice. A smooth, energy-filled tenor echoed. He channeled the absorbed Melta energy and fired it back. It wasn't a beam of heat. It was a concentrated, rainbow-colored laser of pure, ultraviolet energy that struck the Marine. The Marine's armor didn't melt, it vaporized. The Black Templar, a veteran of 100 wars, ceased to exist in a flash of purple light. The other Marines, seeing their brother annihilated by his own, reflected attack, let out a collective roar of pure, unadulterated hatred. This was not just a Xenos. This was a witch. For the Emperor, slay the abomination, they charged, drawing their massive, roaring chainswords. Ben flashed green again. The slender, crystalline form of Chromastone was replaced by a 15-foot-tall, muscle-bound, dinosaur-like behemoth. Time for a classic. Humungosaur's voice, a deep, reptilian bellow, roared. "Let's get ready to rumble." He met their charge. A chainsword, its teeth spinning with enough force to cut through steel, bit into Humungosaur's thick, armored hide. The teeth screeched, sparked, and then shattered. Humungosaur looked down at the broken, smoking weapon, then at the stunned Marine who held it. My turn. He didn't just punch. He smashed. He grabbed the sergeant by the helmet with one hand and a second Marine by his backpack with the other. He slammed them together with the force of a hydraulic press. The sound was a sickening, final crunch of collapsing ceramite and bone. He threw the two broken armored dolls aside and backhanded a third, sending him flying through the air to crash into the ruins of a building, which then collapsed on top of him. The remaining Marines, for the first time in their long, fanatical lives, felt a new, cold emotion. Fear. They were Space Marines. They did not retreat. But they were also tactical geniuses, and they knew, with an absolute certainty, that they could not win this fight. "Fall back. Regroup," one of them shouted. "Bring in the dreadnought." Ben watched them run. He reverted to his human form, dusting off his hands. Well, that was a warm-up. Now, where did Vilgax get to? The battle on Sanctus Lys was not a simple, two-sided affair. While the Black Templars and the local Imperial Guard fought a desperate, failing war against the endless tide of cornate daemons, a third, more subtle power watched from the shadows. In a high, shattered spire overlooking the ruined plaza, a new entity observed Ben's devastating display. It was not a brutish bloodletter or a fanatical word-bearer. It was a creature of shimmering, impossible colors, its form constantly shifting, its bird-like head crowned with iridescent feathers. It was a lord of change, a greater daemon of Tsientia, the chaos god of plots, schemes, and manipulation. This daemon, known as Kairos Fateweaver in some realities, but as Zerfil the Unseen here, was the true architect of this invasion. The Cornate Horde was merely its pawn, a loud, brutal distraction to mask its own, far more subtle ritual. Zerfil had watched Ben's arrival. It had seen him appear in a flash of green light. It had seen him analyze the battlefield, and it had just watched, with a growing, multifaceted fascination, as he had single-handedly, and with impossible versatility, annihilated a squad of the Emperor's finest. The Lord of Change's vast, intricate mind, which held the tangled skeins of 1,000 different futures, recalculated. This was new. It was not a Xenos. Not in the way the Imperium understood it. It was a human, but it was also everything else. It was a living, breathing, walking library of an infinite number of biological forms. It was not just a warrior. It was a key to a power that Tsiench himself would covet. More importantly, it had just declared itself an enemy of the Imperium. A new plan, a beautiful, intricate, and wonderful new plan, began to form in the daemon's mind. The brute force of Khorne was failing. The rigid dogma of the Imperium was irrelevant. But this creature of change, this was a being it could work with. As Ben stood in the plaza, catching his breath, a new voice spoke, not to his ears, but directly inside his head. It was not the harsh, guttural commands of the Marines or the mindless screams of the daemons. It was a smooth, reasonable, and deeply intelligent whisper. "You are magnificent," the voice said, its words seeming to slither into his consciousness. A true agent of change in a galaxy of stagnation. A being of infinite variety in a world of crushing, monochrome dogma. Ben spun around, his hand on the Omnitrix. "Who's that? Show yourself." "I am a friend," the voice whispered. A shimmering, vaguely humanoid form of pure blue and pink light materialized a few yards away. It was Zerfil, projecting a less terrifying, more palatable illusion of itself. I am a being of knowledge, and I, too, am an enemy of the Corpse Emperor and his black armored fools who just tried to kill you. You're one of them, Ben said, his eyes narrowing. He could feel the same, sickly, wrong energy from this thing as he had from the red demons. You're just a different flavor of monster. Monster? I am a liberator, the Lord of Change replied, its voice a symphony of subtle flattery. You saw what they did. They slaughter the innocent. They enforce a brutal, mindless tyranny in the name of a dead god. We seek to free this galaxy, to bring about an age of change, of potential, of magic. We are one and the same. You and I. We are both heroes. It gestured to the great, swirling, purple-red vortex in the sky. The warp rift. That is our gateway, our path to freeing this world. The Templars seek to close it, to reimpose their sterile, dead order. We can grant you the power to rule this new, enlightened age. And, perhaps, we can even grant you a path back to your own, lost reality. The offer was perfect. It was a lie, wrapped in a truth, wrapped in a temptation. It offered Ben everything he wanted. An alliance against the bad guys he had just fought. A noble-sounding cause, liberation, and the one thing he desperately needed, a way home. Ben looked at the shimmering, beautiful, and utterly false being. He looked at the screaming, chaotic warp rift. He looked at the bodies of the cultists the Marines had executed. Then he grinned. You know, I've heard that exact speech from at least 3 different dimensions. It never gets old. But you're right about one thing. Oh? The Lord of Change asked. Its plan seemingly working. You're right that I'm an agent of change, Ben said, his hand already slamming down on the Omnitrix dial. And that portal? It is the problem. The Lord of Change, Zerfil, pulsed with a triumphant, unseen light. The mortal was taking the bait. His logic was flawless. The enemy of my enemy. Indeed, Zerfil whispered, its illusory form shimmering with false sympathy. Help us defend it. Help us secure the gateway, and your path home will be. I'm not going to defend it, you feathered idiot, Ben's voice interrupted. In a flash of green light, the form of Humungosaur was gone, replaced by a strange, clockwork-like being of green and copper. Clockwork. I'm going to close it, Clockwork stated, his voice a ticking mechanical whir. The Lord of Change's serene, illusory form flickered violently, its calm breaking. What? Fool! You cannot close the warp. It is the eternal, primal truth of this. I don't care what it is, Ben replied. I'm not from here. Your primal truth is just a broken sewer pipe in my neighborhood. And I'm the plumber. Clockwork raised his hands. The air around him began to shimmer. He wasn't targeting the daemon. He was targeting the great, swirling, purple and red vortex in the sky. He was targeting the warp rift itself. Zerfil, a being of Tseanch, a master of fate and the flows of time, suddenly felt a power it had never encountered. It felt the very fabric of space-time around the portal begin to groan, to resist. What are you doing? The daemon shrieked, its illusory form dissolving, revealing the true, chaotic, multifaceted horror beneath. You cannot. Time is my domain. Not anymore. It's not, Clockwork said. He unleashed his power. It wasn't a blast of energy. It was a wave of pure, temporal force. A beam of glowing, green chronal energy that struck the warp rift. The effect was immediate and profoundly, cosmically wrong. The great, swirling vortex, which had been vomiting daemons and chaos energy onto the planet, stopped. It froze, and then it began to spin backwards. The Lord of Change watched in absolute, mind-shattering horror. The mortal was not attacking the portal. He was rewinding it. The daemons on the battlefield, the bloodletters and fleshhounds who were still fighting in the distance, suddenly stopped their slaughter. They looked up, their minds, which were a simple extension of the warp's will, filled with a new, alien sensation. Panic. They felt a pull, An irresistible, backward pull. They began to slide, their claws leaving furrows in the mud, as they were dragged, screaming and kicking, back towards the rift. The bodies of the daemons Ben had already purged, which had been dissolving into the earth, reformed, flew back into the air, and were sucked into the vortex. "No!" Zerfil roared, flapping its great, chaotic wings, trying to fly against the temporal current. "This is not possible. This is heresy." "It's not heresy," Clockwork's voice whirred calmly over the din. "It's just common sense. You made a mess. You're going to clean it up." The temporal wave intensified. The portal, now a raging, counterclockwise hurricane, was pulling in everything of the warp. The skies were cleared of demonic furies. The ground was scoured clean of the red-skinned legions. It was an act of pure, divine, and utterly meticulous undoing. The Lord of Change, for all its power, was not immune. It shrieked as the temporal pull seized its own, massive form. It was being dragged, foot by agonizing foot, back towards the portal, back towards the realm it had sought to escape. "You will pay for this, mortal," it screamed, its talons gouging the stone. "The Changer of Ways will see you burn for this." Yeah, get in line," Clockwork said, giving a final, concentrated blast of chronal energy. With a final, desperate, soul-tearing scream, the Lord of Change was ripped from the material world and sucked back into the warp. The portal, its contents now fully rewound, flickered, collapsed in on itself, and with a final, quiet pop, vanished. The red and purple sky was gone. The normal, polluted, gray sky of Sanctus Lyce returned. The demonic invasion, an event that should have taken decades of bloody, grinding war to repel, had been ended in less than 30 seconds. The silence that fell over the battlefield was absolute. The Imperial forces, who had been locked in a desperate, last-ditch struggle for survival, now stood in a state of stunned, disbelieving silence. The endless, screaming tide of daemons was just gone. In a hidden command bunker, a Black Templar marshal, who had been coordinating the planetary defense, stared at his tactical display. 100 to 1,000 red demonic runes had, in the space of half a minute, vanished, utterly. "Report." The marshal's voice was a low, dangerous growl. "What just happened? Did the Grey Knights perform an exterminatus-level ritual?" "No, my lord," a terrified tech priest replied, his voice quavering. The Xenos, the green one. It pointed at the warp rift, and the rift. It ate itself. All the daemons are gone." The marshal was silent. He had no words. His entire, faith-based understanding of the universe, of the eternal, unstoppable nature of the archenemy, had just been shattered by a single, inexplicable, heretical act. On the battlefield, Ben reverted to his human form, a satisfied smirk on his face. Well, that's one problem solved. Now, about Vilgax. His victory was premature. The Lord of Change, in its final screaming moment of banishment, had done one last, spiteful thing. As it was pulled into the closing rift, it had lashed out with a tendril of pure, sentient energy. It did not strike Ben. It struck the ground beneath him. It was not an attack. It was a summoning. A desperate, chaotic one. The ground tore open, and a new, terrible creature, a thing of pure, chaotic malice that had been stranded in the void, was pulled through just as the rift sealed. It was a Chaos Lord, a champion of Chaos Undivided, its soul forfeit to all four gods. It was a massive, hulking brute in Terminator armor, its form fused with the flesh of a dozen screaming, lesser daemons. It was a living, breathing avatar of pure, unadulterated chaos, and it was furious. It had been stranded, and now it was free. It saw the mortal who had inadvertently, and then purposefully, been the cause of its predicament. "Fool!" it roared, its voice a chorus of 1,000 damned souls. "You have sealed my exit. You will die for your arrogance." It raised a massive, demonic axe, crackling with the dark energy of all four chaos gods. Ben looked at the new 20-foot-tall monster. He looked at the sealed sky. He looked at his Omnitrix. Right. So. Bigger. Got it. He didn't just dial up a new alien. He went for the failsafe. The ultimate solution. He slammed his hand down on the Omnitrix dial, and his body was engulfed in a column of green light so bright it dwarfed everything. The Chaos Lord paused, its axe held high, momentarily blinded. When the light faded, Ben was gone. In his place stood a new being. It was tall, its body a void of blackness, speckled with the light of distant, dying stars. It had no face, no features, only a cold, absolute, and utterly boundless presence. Alien X. Motioned to discuss the new threat. Alien X's voice spoke, but it was three voices at once. Bellicus, the voice of rage, Serena, the voice of compassion, and Ben, the voice of reason. This creature is an abomination, Bellicus's voice growled. It is a festering wound of pure chaos. It must be destroyed. I second the motion. It is a soul in agony, Serena's voice whispered. It is a slave to 1,000 conflicting masters. It must be healed, given peace. I also second the motion, Ben's voice. Healed? Destroyed? Same diff, in this case. Right. Motion passed. The Chaos Lord, sensing the impossible, godlike power before it, finally felt a flicker of the one emotion it had never known, fear. It swung its axe, a desperate, hopeless blow. Alien X did not move. He did not dodge. He simply raised a hand. The axe, the demonic energies, the very concept of the Chaos Lord, stopped. Motion to retroactively erase this entity's existence from all known and unknown realities, preventing its fall to chaos, its subsequent corruption, and its really annoying habit of shouting, Ben's voice said. Agreed, said Bellicus. Agreed, said Serena. Alien X clenched his fist. The Chaos Lord did not explode. It did not dissolve. It simply ceased to be. It vanished from existence so completely that the very laws of physics rushed in to fill the void it left, creating a small, implosive thunderclap. It was not just dead. It was never born. Across the galaxy, in the eye of terror, 4 gods, who had been watching this new, interesting player, suddenly felt a cold, sharp, and utterly unfamiliar sensation. A piece of their power, a champion they had nurtured for 10,000 years, was not just gone, it was erased. For the first time in their eternal, unchanging existence, the Chaos Gods felt a new emotion. They felt fear. The act of uncreation was a psychic event on a scale the 40K galaxy had not felt since the birth of Slanesh. The permanent, retroactive destruction of a favored Chaos champion sent a shockwave through the immaterium. The Chaos Gods recoiled in fear, sealing their rifts, their great game momentarily halted by the appearance of a power that did not play by their rules. On the ground of Sanctus Lys, the Imperial forces, who had been fighting for their lives moments before, were left in a state of dumbfounded, terrified silence. The demonic hordes had not just been defeated, they had been deleted. Ben 10, now back in his human form, dusted off his shoulders. Right, that's the demons sorted. Now, Vilgax, but his actions had consequences. The psychic shockwave of Alien X, combined with the sudden, simultaneous panic of the Chaos Gods, was a psychic beacon of unprecedented magnitude. It screamed across the galaxy, a silent, psychic dinner bell, and the biggest, hungriest, and most uncomplicatedly violent race in the galaxy heard it. Far across the void, in a ramshackle, planet-sized fleet of rust, scrap, and pure, concentrated aggression, the Orc war boss, Gazkol Mag Uruk Thraka, was bored. His WAAAGH was slowing. The Humies were putting up a pathetic, uninspiring fight. Then he felt it. A new boss. A new Humie, who had just made the Chaos Gits run away. A boss who was so powerful, so fighty, that his very presence was a psychic roar that made Gazkul's teeth itch. "What's dat?" he bellowed, rising from his scrap throne. Dat's the sound of a proper fight. A real boss. A weird boy, his eyes rolling back in his head, his brain boiling from the psychic feedback, shrieked, "Boss, I sees it! I sees a green git, but he's a humie, but he's green. And he's a lot of gits. The weird boy's head exploded in a shower of green energy. Gazkul was ecstatic. A green, humie git, who was also a lot of gits, and who could make a weird boy's head explode just by thinking about him. This was the WAAGH of a lifetime. "Turn to ships," he roared to his fleet. "Set a course for dat shiny git. We's got a real war to fight." A million orcs, spread across a fleet of continent-sized, scrap-built space hulks and kill cruisers, answered his call. The entire planet-sized WAAGA, a force that had been terrorizing an entire imperial segmentum, changed course. Its new target, the lone green-clad figure on the quiet smoking ruins of Sanctus Lys. Ben, who had just located Vilgax's crashed, and now silent, ship on the horizon, paused. His Omnitrix sensors flared, warning him of a new, massive energy signature. "Oh, come on," he groaned, as 1,000 crude, rust-bucket ships began to tear their way out of warp space in high orbit, a cloud of space junk that blotted out the stars. Now what? The orc fleet was not a subtle thing. It was a tide of rust, bad intentions, and pure, joyous, psychopathic violence. Ben, flying into the upper atmosphere as Jetray, watched as the fleet, numbering in the thousands, began to fill the sky. They were launching dropships, crude, rocket-powered metal boxes that were simply plummeting towards the planet's surface. "Okay," Ben said to himself, his mind racing. "This isn't a surgical strike. This is a planetary-scale problem. Brute force isn't going to cut it. I can't punch a million ships." He hovered in the stratosphere, his mind cycling through his 1,009,600 alien forms, searching for the right tool for the job. "They're loud," he mused. "They're crude. Their ships look like they're held together with duct tape and wishful thinking. Wait, that's it," he smirked. "If they're that fragile, they really won't like this." He slammed his hand onto the Omnitrix dial. He didn't just transform, he evolved. In a flash of green, he was no longer Jetray. He was Echo, a small, white, silicon-based life form. He immediately activated his primary ability. He duplicated, and duplicated, and duplicated. In the space of 30 seconds, the orbit of Sanctus Lys was filled with a cloud of small, white figures. Not thousands, hundreds of thousands. An army of Echoes, all linked to Ben's primary consciousness. The orc fleet, their sensors picking up this massive, sudden cloud of something weird, were momentarily confused. "Water D, tiny gits," a captain on one of the cruisers roared. "Load da big shooters." They were too slow. Ben gave the command. Every single one of the hundreds of thousands of Echoes slammed their Omnitrix dials at the exact same, pre-calculated instant. The sky itself seemed to ignite. The entire cloud of white figures was consumed in a flash of blinding, evolving, green-black energy. When the light faded, the orbit of Sanctus Lys was now held by an army of ultimate Echoes. They were no longer small, white, and silicon. They were tall, blue, living amplifiers, their bodies a sleek, robotic shell, their heads a detached, floating disk of pure sonic power. They were an army of sonic dooms. Ben, his consciousness now spread across a fleet of his own, gave the final, silent command. They attacked. It was not a wave of lasers or missiles. It was a wave of pure, concentrated, and utterly devastating sound. 1,000 ultimate Echoes on the front line opened their mouths and screamed. They unleashed a focused, coordinated, and galaxy-shaking wall of sound. It was a beam of pure, resonant, sonic force, amplified and focused through their evolved bodies. The orc ships, crude, ramshackle constructions of scrap metal, rivets, and pure, blind luck, were not built to withstand a coordinated, resonant frequency assault. The first wave of sound hit the forward kill cruisers. The sound didn't just hit them, it vibrated them. The rivets popped. The welded seams tore open. The crude, metal plates, which were already vibrating with the energy of the WAAGH, were suddenly hit with a frequency that tore their molecular bonds apart. The orc ships didn't explode. They disintegrated. They shattered like a wine glass hit with the perfect high C note. They were vibrated into dust, scrap, and frozen, confused orc corpses. The orc fleet, for the first time in its existence, felt a new emotion. Not fear, not rage, but pure, unadulterated confusion. Their ships were falling apart. For no reason, Ben's army of sonic dooms advanced, their collective shout a symphony of pure, calculated annihilation. They swept through the orc, WAWAGH, a wave of sound that left nothing but particulate matter and shattered scrap in its wake. Space hulks. Asteroids hollowed out and turned into warships, simply crumbled, collapsing in on themselves. Their orc inhabitants turned to green-skinned paste by the sheer, concussive, internal vibrations. Gazkul Thraka, on his flagship, the Da World Breaker, watched his fleet, his glorious, unbeatable WAAGHE, be turned into cosmic dust by sound. That's cheatin', he roared, just as a focused beam of sonic energy struck his own ship. The Da World Breaker shuddered. Its engines tore themselves from their mountings, and the great ship, the pride of the orc race, split in two. In less than 10 minutes, the largest WAAGH in the segmentum was gone. Annihilated, destroyed without a single glorious proper fight. Ben 10, his army of ultimate echoes remerging into a single form, reverted to his human self. He floated in the dead silence of space, surrounded by a cloud of fine, metallic and organic dust. Well, he said to the empty void, that's that. Now seriously, where is Vilgax? The sheer, psychic, and temporal spatial power of Ben's actions, erasing a greater daemon, then annihilating a galaxy class. WAAGH, with a resonant frequency attack, did more than just alert the living. It awoke the dead, deep within the core of Sanctus Lys, a planet that had been seeded with more than just imperial faith. A signal was received. The planet was not just a shrine world. It was, unknown to the Imperium, a Necron tomb world. A minor one, yes, but a tomb world nonetheless. The massive, chaotic energy spikes from Ben's activities, the temporal distortion from clockwork, the anti-reality pulse from Alien X, the sheer, cosmic vibration from Ultimate Echo was the equivalent of a galactic-scale alarm clock. In the deepest, most shielded crypt, a great sarcophagus of living metal whirred. A single, green, optical light flickered to life. The tomb world of Mandragora, after 60 million years of slumber, began to awaken. Its systems, still sluggish, registered the events in orbit. It saw the destruction of the orc fleet. It analyzed the energy signature. It was not chaos. It was not imperial. It was new. And it was immensely, absurdly powerful. This data was beamed, via a quantum-entangled transmitter, to the nearest active Necron command. Far across the segmentum, aboard his Cairn-class tomb ship, the Song of Oblivion, Anrakir the Traveler, the most infamous of all Necron overlords, received the signal. He was on his own, eternal crusade, awakening tomb worlds to unite his scattered, broken people. This new signal was not a plea for awakening. It was a report of a new power, a single, shape-shifting entity that had, in the space of a single day, annihilated both a chaos invasion and an orc WAAGH. Anrakir's ancient, logical mind processed the data. This was not a weapon. This was not a Xenos. This was a god, or something so close as to be indistinguishable. A being of such power, of such versatility, could be the key to finally uniting the Necron dynasties, the key to reversing the biotransference, the key to winning the war against the old ones who had cursed them. His purpose shifted. He abandoned his current course. He opened a new, silent, inertialist drive, and his fleet of black, crescent moon-shaped ships vanished, reappearing in the void of the Sanctus Lys system. Ben, who was in the process of salvaging Vilgax's crashed, and now definitively empty, ship for any clues, felt a new, cold presence, colder than the Templars, colder than the void. His Omnitrix sensors screamed a new kind of warning. He looked up. The sky was filled, once more, not with scrap, but with ships of sleek, black, and utterly silent metal. They moved with a geometric precision that was deeply, fundamentally unsettling. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," Ben groaned. "What now? Space skeletons?" The Necron fleet, led by Anrakir the Traveler, was a force of cold, technological perfection. They did not broadcast demands. They did not launch crude drop pods. They simply arrived. In a shimmer of emerald green light, a phalanx of Necron warriors and their Canoptech wraiths teleported to the ground, materializing in a perfect, silent circle around Ben. Their Gauss flayers, weapons that unmade targets on a molecular level, were raised as one. Ben's senses, his very hero's instinct, flared. These were not demons. These were not orcs. These were not even human fanatics. These were machines, cold, ancient, and utterly without mercy. "Right," Ben said, his hand hovering over the Omnitrix. "No talking." "Got it." He slammed the dial. "Upgrade." In a flash of green, his human form dissolved into a living, liquid metal, green and black creature. A galvanic mechamorph. The Necrons opened fire. A volley of green Gauss flare energy lanced out. Ben didn't dodge, he simply flowed. His liquid metal body became a puddle, the beams passing harmlessly through his now two-dimensional form. He surged forward, a wave of living technology, and latched onto the nearest Necron warrior. The effect was instantaneous. The Necron, a being of living metal and ancient, unbreakable protocols, suddenly shrieked a sound of digital, tearing agony. Green, circuit-like patterns spread from Ben's body, overriding the Necron's own systems. The warrior's green, glowing eyes turned, a brighter, more vibrant green. "Oh, now this is a serious upgrade." Ben's voice, now digitized, came from the Necron's own Vox grill. He had hijacked it. He had upgraded a Necron. The other Necrons paused, their logical minds unable to process this. One of their own, its energy signature now corrupted, turned and opened fire on its comrades. But Anrakir was a lord. He was not just a machine. He was a consciousness. Anomaly. His metallic voice boomed from his flagship. "It is a technoform, a virus. Purge the infected unit." A Necron overlord on the ground, its own, more powerful body gleaming, raised its war scythe and cut the upgraded Necron in half. Ben simply flowed from the bisected machine, a liquid metal puddle that was already surging towards its next target. "This is getting tedious," Ben's voice came from his new host. "I need something bigger." He saw it. A Necron ghost arc, a skeletal, floating transport, was phasing in, its internal bay opening to unleash more warriors. This was his chance. He abandoned the Necron warrior, a green and black blur, and leaped at the ghost arc just as it materialized. He phased his own liquid metal form through its hull, merging with its core systems. Aboard the Song of Oblivion, Anrakir watched in disbelief as his own transport ship suddenly, violently changed. Green, glowing, circuit-like patterns erupted across its hull. Its engines flared, burning a brilliant Omnitrix green. Its Gauss arrays swiveled and, instead of firing on the ground, fired directly at the rest of his own fleet. "What sorcery is this?" Anrakir roared. "It's called an upgrade. Chrome Dome." Ben's voice boomed over the Necron comms net, his consciousness now in control of the entire building-sized warship. "Nice ship you've got here. A little dead. Needs some life. Needs some Ben." He was not just controlling the ship, he was evolving it. The living metal of its hull was repairing itself, its systems becoming faster, more intuitive, its weapons now supercharged with his own galvanic energy. But he wasn't done. He flew his new, upgraded Ghost Ark in a high-speed kamikaze run directly at Anrakir's tomb ship. "Stop him," Anrakir commanded. It was too late. Ben didn't just hit the tomb ship. He phased through its outer hull, merging his entire, ship-sized, upgraded form with the Necron flagship itself. He was inside the core. The tomb ship was now his. He felt the central consciousness of the ship, the command protocols for the entire tomb world below, the protocols that had been running for 60 million years. And he found the master command, the command Anrakir had used to awaken them. You know, Ben's voice now echoed from every speaker, in every Necron ship, in every tomb on the planet. You all look very, very tired. You've been up for, well, way past your bedtime. You need a nap. He found the protocol for the great sleep. And he added a new, simple, upgrade-style logic bomb to it. Activate infinite sleep cycle and disable all external wake-up calls. Good night, space skeletons. He gave the command. Across the entire system, the Necron fleet went dead. Their emerald green lights flickered and died. Their inertialess drives powered down. The tomb world of Mandragora, which had just begun to awaken, groaned, and its systems went back into their silent, eternal slumber. Ben 10 had just, single-handedly, put an entire Necron dynasty back to bed, permanently. Ben, now in his human form, floated in the silent, dead void of space, surrounded by the ghost fleet of the Necrons. He had extricated himself from the tomb ship's core just before the shutdown command finalized, reverting to Jetray to survive in the vacuum. Okay, he said, breathing the alien's internal oxygen supply. That's the robots. That's the demons. That's the big, green, angry mushrooms. That's the angry Space Knight heretic people. He mentally ticked them off. Am I done now? Can I please find Vilgax and go home? His question was answered by a new, terrible, and utterly alien sensation. It was not a sound. It was not a sight. It was a feeling. A vast, cold, and absolutely singular psychic presence that washed over the entire star system. It was a consciousness so immense, so unified, and so hungry, that it made the Chaos God's presence feel unfocused by comparison. It was the shadow in the warp, the psychic presence of the Tyrannid hive mind, the events on Sanctus Lyce, the temporal distortion, the uncreation of a Chaos Lord, the psychic death of a WAH. The forced shutdown of a tomb world had created a psychic beacon of unprecedented power and complexity. The hive mind, which was already drifting through the intergalactic void, sensed this beacon. It did not sense a threat. It did not sense a rival. It sensed food. It sensed a single, unique, and impossibly dense source of biomass. A single entity that held within itself the genetic code of over 1 million different, viable, and powerful species. It was the ultimate prize. The perfect, all-in-one meal that would allow the hive mind to evolve in ways it had never dreamed of. The Omnitrix. The hive mind changed course. A tendril fleet, a vast, swirling nebula of living, biomechanical ships tore its way into the edges of the star system. It was a tide of chitin, claws, and all-consuming, singular purpose. It was the Great Devourer, and it had come for Ben 10. Ben stared at the approaching fleet, his HUD flashing with warnings of infinite, hostile, biological signatures. He had never seen anything like it. This wasn't an army. It was a species. An entire species, acting as one, with one goal, to eat him. You've got to be kidding me, he groaned. An entire fleet of space locusts? This galaxy is officially the worst. He knew he couldn't fight them. Not like this. He couldn't blast them all. He couldn't vibrate them all. He couldn't even upgrade them all. They were biological, not technological. This was a biological problem. And it required a biological solution. A very, very clever, and very, very small one. The Tyrannid hive fleet was a beautiful, horrifying spectacle. Bioships, the size of cities, pulsed with a sickly, organic light. Swarms of smaller, fighter-like creatures, gargoyles, swarmed out to meet him. Ben, still as Jetray, didn't fight them. He dodged, his speed and agility allowing him to weave through their undisciplined, swarming attacks. He had a plan, a stupid, insane, and utterly brilliant plan. He wasn't trying to escape the fleet. He was trying to get eaten by it. He targeted the largest of the bioships, the central hive ship, the vessel that pulsed with the strongest, most commanding psychic presence, the Norn Queen. The mind and womb of the entire fleet. He flew straight at it. The ship's defenses registered him. Great, fleshy sphincter ports opened on its chitinous hull, spewing streams of acid and bioplasma. He dodged them, his flight path a chaotic, evasive spiral. A larger creature, a harpy, its wings a tattered, leathery membrane, swooped down, its great, taloned claws open, trying to snatch him from the sky. Gotcha. Ben grinned. He didn't dodge. He allowed the harpy to catch him. The great, taloned claws closed around his streamlined, ray-like body. The creature roared in triumph, its new, valuable piece of biomass secured. Wait for it, Ben muttered to himself. He flashed green. He was no longer Jatray. He was now Goop, a small, green, sentient, and utterly indestructible puddle of polymorphic ooze, his anti-gravity projector humming at its center. The harpy's claws, which had been gripping a solid, muscular body, suddenly closed on nothing. A slippery, acidic, green gel. Goop simply flowed through its claws, a living slime, and latched onto the creature's back. The harpy shrieked, this time in confusion, trying to shake the strange green ooze from its hide. But Goop's acidic nature was already at work, dissolving a small, clean hole in the creature's chitin. The harpy, in a panic, did exactly what Ben had been counting on. It returned to its hive ship, diving into a massive, pulsing, sphincter-like opening, a docking bay for the fleet's bioflyers. It returned to the nest, to be reabsorbed, to be healed. And it carried Ben, as Goop, with it. He was inside. Inside the main hive ship. The interior was a nightmare of pulsating, organic corridors, walls of living flesh, and rivers of digestive, nutrient-rich fluids. The air was thick, hot, and humid, like the inside of a living body. He had just become a virus. Inside the hive ship, Ben, still as Goop, detached from his ride. The harpy was reabsorbed into a great pulsating wall of flesh, its biomass broken down to be remade. Ben, a simple puddle of slime, was ignored by the ship's internal defense organisms. He was, for the moment, just another piece of organic material in a giant biological soup kitchen. His anti-gravity projector allowed him to float, undetected, through the vast, cavernous arteries of the bioship. He was moving against the flow, against the psychic pull, towards the brain. He could feel it, the immense, singular, and utterly dominant consciousness that was the Norn Queen. He found her. In a chamber so vast it was a small moon, the Norn Queen lay, a creature the size of a mountain, a grotesque, beautiful, and terrifying fusion of queen, womb, and brain. She was connected to the entire fleet by a million thick, synaptic cables, her vast, psychic mind the node through which the hive mind itself operated. Right. Ben's voice, a gurgling, synthesized sound from Goop's projector, whispered, "She's the really big boss, and I am way too big to get in there." He was a puddle of slime, yes, but he was still a puddle the size of a man. He couldn't just merge with the Norn Queen. He needed to be smaller, much, much smaller. He slammed his hand, or the gooey equivalent of it, onto the Omnitrix dial on his anti-gravity projector. He flashed green. He was no longer Goop. He was Nanomech, a tiny, one-eyed biomechanical fairy, no larger than a speck of dust. He was now small enough. He flew, undetected, a single, insignificant gnat in a chamber the size of a country. He flew directly at the Norn Queen's vast, pulsating, external brain case. He found a pore, a tiny, microscopic opening in her flesh, and he flew inside. He was now inside the Norn Queen, inside the very mind of the Hive Fleet. He saw it. The genetic code, the core, primal instincts of the Tyranid race, laid bare before him as a series of complex, biological, and psychic data streams. Hunger. Consume. Evolve. Adapt. Consume. It was a simple, beautiful, and utterly horrifying code. Ben, as Nanomech, was not just a tiny alien. He was a living, sentient, nanotechnical virus. And he was about to rewrite the code. He didn't need to destroy it. He didn't need to fight it. He just needed to edit it. He found the core, primary directive, the consume command. And he added a new, simple, and utterly devastating line of code right next to it. New primary instinct. All biomass in this galaxy is toxic. All biomass is poison. It causes pain. It causes death. Consumption equals extinction. Flee, flee, never return. He injected the new code. The effect was instantaneous. The Norn Queen, her mind suddenly and violently at war with itself, let out a psychic scream that shattered the minds of every creature in her ship. The hive mind, the great, collective consciousness of the entire fleet, was hit with a single, contradictory, and absolutely terrifying new instinct. Hunger. Consume. Flee. Poison. The hive mind went insane. The Tyranid fleet, which had been a single, unified, predatory organism, shattered into a million warring, terrified individuals. The ships, no longer under a single, guiding consciousness, began to fire on each other. The bioflyers, driven by a new, maddening terror of the very biomass they were made to consume, began to attack their own hive ships. The entire Tyranid fleet turned on itself in a grotesque, galaxy-sized orgy of self-destruction. Bioships tore each other apart, their organic cannons firing wildly. Swarms of Gaunts, now terrified of their own Norn Queen, began to eat their way out of their own ships. The Great Devourer, the ultimate biological threat, was destroying itself. Ben 10, his work done, reverted to Jetre. He had to reform and find a way out first, and flew from the heart of the dying, self-destructing hive ship, leaving the Tyranid threat to permanently and bloodily remove itself from the galaxy. Floating in the dead, silent void, surrounded by the frozen, drifting fleets of the orcs and the necrons, and the slowly dissolving, organic wreckage of the Tyranids, Ben 10 finally had a moment to breathe. He had faced 4 of this galaxy's greatest threats. He had defeated them all. And he was exhausted. This galaxy, this whole, entire, blasted universe, was broken. It was a self-destructing engine of pure, unadulterated, grimdark misery. It was an endless, chaotic, pointless war. He'd had enough. He had just wanted to find Vilgax. His archenemy was, at this point, a complete non-issue. Vilgax's ship was a cold, dead wreck on the planet below. Ben had bigger problems. He had to go home. But how? His aliens, powerful as they were, couldn't just punch a hole back to his own reality. He needed a map. He needed a source of power. He needed something. He thought back. He had been chasing Vilgax, but what was the source of all this madness? What was the one, single, unifying thread in this chaotic, multi-sided war? The Emperor. The black-armored knights had chanted his name. The daemons had screamed of a corpse god. This Emperor was the focal point, the center of this galaxy's faith and its madness. He could feel it, a vast, impossibly powerful, and deeply, deeply agonized psychic presence, a beacon of golden light that was 1,000,000 times stronger than anything he had yet encountered. It was a psychic lighthouse, and it was screaming in eternal, unending pain. That was the source. That was the power. He didn't know if it was good or evil. He didn't care. It was the only thing in this galaxy powerful enough to potentially send him home. Or, at the very least, it was the final boss he had to confront to make sense of this place. He had to go to Terra. He hovered in space, his Jetre form feeling small and insignificant for the first time. He couldn't fly there. It was a galaxy away, but he didn't need to fly. He was Ben 10. He slammed the Omnitrix dial. He transformed into clockwork. He floated in the void, a copper and green, clockwork-bodied alien. He began to turn the great key on his head. He wasn't just manipulating local time. He was looking at it. He saw the threads of space-time, the great cosmic web of reality, and he saw the shining, golden, screaming thread of the Astronomicon, the Emperor's light. It was his pathway. He focused his will. He would not travel through space. He would travel through time. He would project himself forward, to a point where his arrival at Terra was inevitable. No, that was too messy. He had a better idea. He would simply teleport. Not a technological teleport, a temporal one. He would fold space, using time as the lever. He focused on the golden, psychic beacon. He anchored his own, temporal-powered mind to it. And he stepped. He did not fly. He did not travel. He simply wasn't. And then he was. The transition was instantaneous and utterly, fundamentally, reality-shatteringly heretical. He had bypassed the solar fleet. He had bypassed the phalanx. He had bypassed the Aegis shields of the Imperial Palace. He had used a power that this galaxy did not even know existed to teleport himself, a single, Xenos-transforming, unsanctioned entity from a dead ball of a planet in the outer rim, directly into the single, most sacred, most heavily defended, and most unbreachable room in the entire million-world imperium of man. He materialized in a flash of green light and reverted to his human form. He was in the Sanctum Imperialis. Ben materialized in a crouch, his hero instincts on high alert. He found himself in a chamber so vast it beggared belief, its ceiling lost in a man-made, starless night. The air was cold, ancient, and thick with the smell of burning incense and a heavy, electric tang of ozone. The only sound was a low, immense, psychic hum, a sound of 1,000,000 billion souls whispering in unison. He was standing on a floor of polished, black obsidian, at the foot of a staircase that was a mile wide. And, at the top of that staircase, was the throne. It was not a simple chair. It was a machine. A monstrous, baroque, and impossibly complex construct of gold and black, wires and cables, pipes and tubes, all of it humming with a power that made his skin crawl. It was a life support system, a psychic amplifier, and a prison all in one. And on that throne sat the God Emperor of mankind. Ben stared. He had been expecting a king, a god, a tyrant, a final, all-powerful boss. He was looking at a corpse, a desiccated, skeletal, mummified body, its frame impossibly large, ancient beyond comprehension. It was fused to the throne by a web of 1,000 life support cables and psychic conduits. Its mouth was a silent, lipless O of eternal, silent screaming. Its eye sockets were black, empty pits from which a faint, ghostly, and impossibly powerful golden light emanated. This was the Emperor. This was the being the black-armored knights worshipped. This was the corpse god the demons had mocked. But Ben's horror was not at the sight. It was at the feeling. He could feel the Emperor's mind. It was a star, a supernova of pure, unending, and unimaginable agony. It was a consciousness that had been screaming, without pause, for 10,000 years. It was a mind that was holding back an entire ocean-like dimension of pure evil. And the strain, the sheer pain of it, was a psychic wave that washed over Ben, making him want to vomit. This wasn't a king. This was a victim. This wasn't a god. This was a sacrifice. The most terrible, brutal, and endless sacrifice he had ever witnessed. You've built a religion, Ben whispered, his voice cracking in the vast holy chamber, around torturing him. His arrival had not gone unnoticed. Heretic! A roar of pure, unadulterated fury echoed from the base of the throne. A wall of golden armored giants, the Adeptus Custodes, who had been kneeling in silent vigil, rose as one. Their guardian spears, weapons of impossible, holy power, were leveled at him. They were frozen. They were the most powerful, most loyal, most perfect warriors in human history. And a single, unarmored heretic, a Xenos shifter, had just appeared at the foot of the golden throne itself. An intrusion that was so impossible, so blasphemous, that their minds momentarily locked, unable to process the reality of it. Ben looked from the screaming, skeletal corpse on the throne to the golden-armored fanatics who were guarding it, who were perpetuating it. His exhaustion, his desire to go home, to it all vanished, replaced by a new, cold, and utterly righteous fury. This was not a system to be tolerated. This was not a war to be won. This was an abomination to be fixed. You will not touch the master of mankind. The lead custodian, a being of pure, golden rage, finally roared, his voice breaking the spell of disbelief. He took a step forward, his spear aimed at Ben's heart. Ben Tennyson looked at the ultimate bodyguard. He looked at the screaming, dying god he was protecting. He had no time for this. "I'm not here to touch him," Ben said, his voice cold and hard. "I'm here to help him." He slammed his hand onto the Omnitrix dial. Not chromastone, not homungosaur, not clockwork. He needed the one form that could operate on this level. He transformed into Alien X, the Sanctum Imperialis, a chamber that had seen Primarchs and greater daemons, was suddenly filled with a new and utterly absolute presence. The black, star-filled, faceless form of Ben's celestial sapiens form was a void of perfect, calm, and total power that made the raging, psychic inferno of the Emperor seem small by comparison. The Custodes froze. Their weapons, their bodies, their very concept of motion was frozen. They were statues, their golden-armored forms held in a perfect, timeless stasis. Alien X floated silently, his three personalities now in debate. Motion to end this. Ben's voice, the voice of reason, echoed in the vast cosmic mind space. "This is wrong. This whole entire galaxy is wrong. It's built on the eternal torture of a single dying soul. It's the most evil thing I've ever seen." "Agreed," Serena's voice, the voice of compassion and love, whispered. "His suffering is a poison that infects all of reality. It must be ended. He deserves peace." "I second the motion." "Absolutely not," Bellicus's voice, the voice of rage and conflict, roared. "Are you insane? This Emperor is the only thing holding back the tides of chaos. His scream is the only thing keeping this galaxy from being devoured. To help him is to destroy everything. I veto. I will always veto. But what if we could do both?" Ben's voice said, a new, clever, and terribly dangerous idea forming. "What if we don't just help him? What if we finish the job?" Bellicus and Serena paused. "Explain," they said in unison. "Motion," Ben said, his voice now cold and hard. "To perform the ultimate act of heroism, we will fix this broken universe. First, we will grant this poor, dying man's last wish. We will sever the Chaos God's connection to this material reality, permanently. We will slam the door of the warp shut, not with a psychic shield, but by erasing the hinges. Second, we will heal the Emperor's mortal body. We will restore his flesh. We will end his pain." "This is acceptable," Serena whispered. "It is an act of supreme compassion." "And then," Bellicus added, a slow, terrible, and utterly satisfied grin in his voice, "he will be mortal, he will be healed, and he will die. His sacrifice will be over, and the false god will be no more. The destruction of this Imperium will be absolute." "I second the motion." Motion passed, Alien X declared in the silent, frozen throne room. The celestial sapiens form raised its star-dusted hand. The first act was a gesture of no, a single, casual, galaxy-spanning negation. Across the entire 40K universe, every warp rift, every demonic possession, every chaos-tainted soul was silenced. The Chaos Gods, in their great game, suddenly found the board had been taken away. Their connection to the material realm was not just blocked, it was erased. They were sealed, permanently, in their own, screaming, irrelevant void. The second act was a gesture of yes. A wave of pure, creative, reality-bending energy washed over the golden throne. The Emperor of mankind, the mummified, skeletal corpse, felt a sensation he had not known in 10 millennia. Peace. The psychic agony stopped. The failing, ancient machinery of the throne, its purpose now redundant, sputtered, and went silent. The cables and tubes dissolved into dust. And the Emperor, healed, flesh, whole and perfect, grew over his ancient bones. His eyes, no longer burning, empty pits, closed, his lipless, screaming mouth relaxed. He became, for a single, beautiful, glorious instant, the man he had been, whole, perfect, and at rest. His golden psychic light, the Astronomicon, the beacon that had guided humanity for 10,000 years, flared, became a supernova, and then went out. The Emperor of mankind, his torment over, his long watch ended, finally, mercifully, died. Ben 10, now back in his human form, stood in the silent, dark chamber. The custodies were still frozen, their god now a peaceful, human corpse on a dead machine. The 40K universe, as it had been, was destroyed. The Imperium, its god dead, its guiding light extinguished, its FTL travel gone, would shatter into a million, warring, isolated human worlds. The Chaos Gods were banished forever. The eternal, grimdark, apocalyptic war was over. Ben had fixed it. He had destroyed it. He looked at the peaceful, dead Emperor. "You're welcome," he whispered. He turned, transformed into clockwork, and, with a simple temporal step, he vanished, leaving the broken, dark, and now terrifyingly free galaxy to find its own, new, and uncertain path in the silence.